So I have a confession to make. I have always hated trick questions. And although I did not write a trick question, I did throw in what would probably be considered a trick answer. However, it does provide you with the opportunity of gaining some bonus points if you successfully caught it and addressed it. Magento configuration provides us with a lot of possibilities. There's a lot that we can do in the code as we are building out our own configuration, and obviously there is a whole lot that can be configured just straight from the core Magento store configuration. Now, my intention with the question for this week is not to dig too deeply into all that is involved with the configuration and the code behind that. I really just wanted to touch on a couple of the different best practices that I try to follow as I am building out configuration for the features that I'm setting up. If you'd like some more information, maybe dig into the code behind Magento's config a little bit deeper, I'd recommend heading over to SwiftOtter.com and checking out the resources that we have there. Now let's take a look at the question. You are doing a code review for a new module and see the following snippet in system.xml. And obviously we see the code here, pretty basic, just going through setting a couple additional fields, creating a new, obviously, section and group for those fields based on the functionality that's getting created in the module. And so it is going to be involving some updates to the orders. So we look through that code snippet, and the question here is, of the following options, what would be the best recommendation to make? And here are the answers. A, add a comment attribute to each field for clarity. B, switch the backend model attribute on the API key to a password type so that the value is hidden. And C, add an enabled field so that the new module's functionality can be disabled. So we have a code review. Again, nothing fancy, just basically setting some additional config values, creating a new section to contain those, most likely based on a new module, or at least a rather large new feature that is getting created. So let's work through the different options that we have regarding what recommendation you are going to make to your coworker regarding that code snippet. For the first option, option A, we have adding the comment attribute to each of those fields to make sure that people understand when they go into that configuration what they're doing. Now, those two fields are very self-explanatory. One is the API URL, the other one is the API key. Now, I have obviously seen many instances where comments were extremely necessary. But although I've seen instances where the comments were very necessary and extremely helpful, this is not one of those cases. This is two self-explanatory fields, very simple. There's nothing wrong with setting a comment attribute on those fields. There's also no value really that's going to be brought by doing that. So this isn't going to be the best recommendation to make. Now for option B, we'll take a look at it again. We have switching the backend model attribute on the API key to a password type so that the value is hidden. Now I'll just go ahead and admit that this is the trick answer. While having the password type set so that the value is obscured could be a good option and is a good option in some scenarios, we are definitely not going to want to recommend removing the backend model that encrypts the value. That is going to be an integral part of keeping things secure. Definitely more so than just obscuring the value of this field when the people accessing it in the first place are going to be administrators that have been specifically vetted to be able to have access to this information and obviously configure this functionality. So we are not going to want to recommend removing the encryption. Now we could recommend adding the password type or the obscure type to this field so that that value is hidden while also having the encryption going on as well. But we are not going to want to recommend removing the encryption. So that being the case, at face value, option B is also incorrect. So now we get to the final option, option C, and that is to add an enabled field so that the new module's functionality can be disabled. Now, I have personally seen instances where having the ability to enable and disable a module or a specific larger functionality, a functionality that maybe has far-reaching consequences if something were to go wrong. Having that ability to enable and disable it has been a lifesaver. It has saved a ton of time, a ton of frustration, and made it to where if there was a bug that made it through testing, which happens, we all make mistakes. If that bug makes it to production and starts messing up the production site, having the ability to disable that module or that functionality is going to be very, very helpful. So whenever I'm building a module, whenever I am adding a bit of functionality that could be farther reaching, could have larger consequences if something were to go wrong, I'm going to add a config value to where I can disable that. That way, again, if there is a bug that makes it through to production, we have protected ourselves and made our code a bit more bulletproof. So with that being the case, out of these three options, A, B, and C, I am going to be selecting option C as the correct answer. We are going to want to recommend adding an enabled field so that the new module's functionality can be disabled. That is going to make the code safer and stronger and make sure that in the event of something going wrong, we have the ability to fix that right away and then work on a resolution later instead of trying to either revert the functionality that is now on production and causing problems, or having to try to push up a fix and get that taken care of right away. However, I will say that if you did call out option B and mention adding the password or obscure type to that field while keeping the encryption, you can go ahead and give yourself some bonus points. Nice job on that. And the bonus points are good for patting yourself on the back or an excuse to indulge in some celebratory dancing. Just make sure if that looks anything like mine, that no one is watching, or even worse, recording. Thanks for watching.